Hello and welcome back to week number 2 of the ANZ's HGC Premier Division. My name is Skimmy, and tonight I am joined by GL Phoenix as we crack on into the week 2 of gameplay. It is obviously night 1 of 2, and it's all set to crack on off just like this. We've got some fantastic games up for you tonight, but before we jump into those ones specifically, let's recap a little bit as to what happened last week. It was the inception really for Nomia as they got their campaign off to a flying start and a 2-0 victory out against Outlaws. And GL, I mean, to make a statement to say that we can beat a team of this caliber in 9 minutes, would almost say affirm that they are back to where they once were in say 2017.
Absolutely, and that's exactly where we're expecting them to be. They were kind of pipped at the post at the end of last year by Dark-Sided and kind of missed out on their spot to BlizzCon, and they were not very happy about that.
No.
And now they're back and they're ready to really stamp their foot down on the competition, really making a statement in their first series of the new ANZ HDC Premier Division.
Likewise, we had Aztec and Downfall. Downfall going to be playing again tonight. They're going to be in our very first series, but Downfall going up against Aztec. Many actually pitched that Aztec would have been the team to win that one, but Downfall bringing it really to them in the end with those two new players joining, both with Luckadog and Domi. And then finally, we had Crimson and Aztec in this first rotation of games. Crimson went 2-0. It wasn't actually the easiest for them, so I'm actually really excited to see what they can do tonight. So let's actually crack on into it, I suppose, really. What games do we have in the mix for tonight? Crimson up against Downfall is the very first best of 3 series, and after that, Crimson versus Outlaws. So double trouble for those guys. We're going to get to basically see how this top bracket is going to pan on out. Obviously, Nomia were originally going to be playing, but due to Nekomimi having a few roster issues, that match has had to be forfeited. But to recap those games from last week, if you did miss them, make sure to go onto the Games to TV channel or even just onto the Twitch channel here and watch the VOD recap from that. Likewise, go onto our YouTube channel to catch the Clash before, or the calm before the Clash, a little VOD session, almost to give you a bit of a TLDR, so to speak, as to what happened. If you don't have all the time in the world, right, Gio?
Yeah, there's only so much time we have, and it's nice to have those nice little snippets to make sure that we're completely up to date, especially with the fact that we're not able to have all the games on stream. It's nice to be able to catch up on some of those throughout the rest of the week.
That's the way indeed. So let's crack on in. So Crimson up against Downfall. Downfall had a fantastic week last week, as we mentioned at the very start. Their consistency is going to be the key for these guys. They are a team which many would predict are going to hover in this sort of mid to higher section of the ladder. I think for them, it's really a case of, can we push further? Can we really tunnel ourselves into that top 4 position? For many, the first and the second spot, I wouldn't say are a foregone conclusion, but I think there's a distinct difference between the caliber of teams up there and below. So I'm really excited to see how a team like Downfall can bring it, and if they can almost emulate what Aztec did last week, where this is our draft, and we know what drafts can really do, right? They can win or lose you games right there and then.
Absolutely. It's any team can really upset someone with, as you mentioned, just with some really off-the-wall drafts, as we saw last week. So it's very interesting, some of those middle-of-the-pack teams, as you're mentioning, whether or not they're going to be able to rise to the occasion or if they're going to struggle a little bit against some of those lower teams. But Downfall is one of those teams, as you mentioned, is probably going to be floating around the middle of the table. But Crimson on the other side, we've got very high hopes for them. They had a very strong first week and are looking to continue, as we're essentially going to be seeing red all throughout the night as we have 2 series from them back to back.
That's the one indeed, their GL. So 2-0 for both of these teams in the standings, not having dropped a single game yet. So that deadlock is going to be broken tonight. Jumping into the lobby itself, the maps that were banned and what we've then been led into. Downfall went for a ban on Cursed Hollow. Crimson then banned out Brax's Holdout. And that's led for Downfall favouring the map choice itself. They've gone for Infernal Shrines, meaning that Crimson themselves will get the first pick and first ban. Anything that really jumps out to you as a surprise or any interesting talking points from these bans and from these picks there, Gio?
Nothing really too surprising. It's just a bunch of just comfort that you're just not wanting to have to deal with. Braxis is just not really a favorite. And even though when it was first put into the rotation that Volskaya wasn't really favored, now I think teams are much more comfortable on it, so willing to let that through the ban phase. But picking up the Infernal Shrines is just a very standard map, and to be honest, we even like looking at the Western Clash over the weekend, we saw consistently the teams that would pick the map were more often than not winning instead of the first pick.
And it's yeah, I mean it's an interesting talking point that we've discussed at length, I'm sure, in the past, where we decide, what is more advantageous, right? Is the map choice or is the first pick? And I think,
Hmm.
especially from what we saw during the Western Clash, there is a very distinct meta that has taken place, and there's a whole array, right, of these heroes which are far too strong, far too strong, and you can't ban every single one, right? We've had our Maeves, well, Maevs. I mean, pronunciation of this word is always going to be a talking point. We've had our Maev, we've had our our Tyraels, our
The Blaze
Traces, our
Tyrael, yeah.
Blazes. I mean, there are some disgusting compositions that have been on showcase on the highest platform. It's whether or not the ANZ teams here have adapted that. Have they drafted it, perfected it? Can they execute it to that same degree of functionality?
Yeah, that's the thing. You can have all the best drafts in the world, but you have to be able to execute on it at the end of the day. And some of these teams, you are very much expecting them to be able to execute on a lot of these compositions if they're going to be able to get them.
Yeah,
Just have to wait and see, first of all, how the draft plays out and whether or not they're able to really nab some of those very high priority picks and how they're going to be able to utilize them once we get into the game.
speaking of the game, it looks like both these teams are ready to rock and roll. So without any further ado, let's jump into the very first game of tonight. Crimson up against Downfall. It's all going on here on Infernal Shrines.
All right, we should be getting into it in just a second. And yeah, it's going to be a uh, very interesting start to the night. As we mentioned, Crimson are going to be playing two series back to back. So, we're also looking at them to be one of the real contenders for the 1 and 2 spot at
Yep.
the end of this phase of the split. So, very much expect them to be the favorite in this best of 3. So we have to see the consistency and the discipline from this team, but also whether or not they want to not show everything, considering they have another series to come after this, which is arguably of more importance.
Correct. And given it is a double round robin, obviously lots of things are going to change over time with patches and hero releases, obviously. But with that all said, you want to make sure that your standings are pretty strong. Obviously, the first two teams to make it will be the ones going across to Rio de Janeiro for the Intercontinental Clash. That is very important at that.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, these teams kind of fall to I say hide, but I mean, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you are getting these wins. And as we were mentioning before, a lot of this meta, you could just literally look at Master League. You could just look at the Western Clash and go, that's a comp. Why do we need to do our own research? We can just pick this and give it a crack, right? So they open up with the draft. It is going to be a Dahaka ban here by the Crimson lads. And if I was a betting man, I would expect a Abathur as the response. Otherwise, Abathur paired with any of those heroes that we just discussed is an absolute menace.
Yeah, there's by going with that Dahaga as that first ban, that has left a lot on the table. As we were mentioning earlier, things like the Maev, the Blaze, the Tyrael, the Tracer, which was popping up so very frequently throughout the Western Clash, they're all on the board. But the Malfurion as that first ban does pair up with those quite well and does facilitate a lot of compositions, especially with how he is now with the changes to how his regrowth works.
Absolutely, Malfurion is just so disgustingly strong. But the thing is, Abathur hasn't been banned. There are a lot of
Exactly.
choices here in this first pick rotation. You've got the Blaze, you've got the ETC, the Tracer, the Tyrael. You've got a lot to decide from, and this is why you can see Crimson hanging on for a second and deciding, how do we best open this one up?
Yeah, especially because you know that whichever one you pick, it's allowing your opponents to grab two of them. And whether or not you want to pick one, but that kind of breaks up a synergy. So not wanting to leave up, say, the Tyrael and the Blaze to be picked up in the same fell swoop, but it is going to be the Maev picked up
Nice.
straight away. Very strong. We've seen it throughout the clash. They do so many disgusting things. It's very annoying to deal with.
There are some pretty disgusting combos that you can run with the old Maev. I'm thinking about the old Stukov. We've seen a fair bit of Stukov. And I think the interesting point in this matchup is that we know that Downfall's player Shrek is love. He loves to play Stukov. Many would argue he is a one-trick. Speaking of, there it is. You cannot allow it to be paired. For the reason being, GL, Maev, if she gets that bind, if she gets that Warden's Cage, you apply that Lurking Arm underneath, hey, there's just nothing you can do. So smart drafting as a response in the first two picks are from Downfall.
Yeah, just very strong picks. We've seen this the power of Stukov, not only with Maev, but just in general around these objectives and just the choke points. Just control so much space and make it very hard for your opponents to really make a way in. So that Stukov, very strong pick, and as you mentioned, Draker's Love is very proficient on that hero. So looking for him to make a lot of the big plays.
Now, where do Crimson decide to go with this one? They are going to be utilizing the time to the best of their ability, and why would you not? We talked about this last week. You can either be a team that rushes through these picks, putting the pressure and the timer against your opponent, or you can fully utilize it and really discuss where you want to go with this draft. I would expect to be seeing potentially the ETC or the Tyrael in this rotation right now before it gets banned out. And there it is, combined with the Greymane. That is a solid dive composition. If somebody jumps in, you're guaranteeing that that person is going to fall on down.
Oh yeah, that's a lot of dive potential and a lot of dive protection, protection while diving that they have with them. The amount of shielding that comes out of a Tyrael nowadays is really quite annoying to deal with, and also just the sanctification just gives a clear beacon for any potential diving heroes. It makes it so easy to get in, and you can throw out locking arms all you want, but if they're in a sanctification, it's not really going to be doing a hell of a lot.
My point exactly there,
yeah,
GL.
it's going to be
Yeah.
Stukov is going to have to be very careful with positioning, not only when it comes to placement of the lurking arms, but just in general around these objectives. Because if he gets caught out, that's a lot of the strength of that composition really mitigated quite a bit.
That's what I was going to say, because generally speaking, if you have a very dive-heavy composition, you know that they are, to a degree, going to be one-dimensional as to how they approach a team fight or how they want to strategize their win conditions as the map unfolds. But with that Tyrael as a certification, the reason I prefer that against the ETC is for the sole reason that you mentioned, right? Stukov cannot prevent the re-engage or cannot try and turn things around with a lurking arm. Blaze can't try and get amongst it. The bunker is there to sort of act as a deterrent, but it's not really a re-engagement tool, if anything, right? So I would be considering potentially for the side of Crimson and ETC ban potentially. Otherwise, I mean, with the Aberford taken off, that prevents the hat targets on Crimson, which are already so strong.
Yeah, and just looking at things to potentially ban from the side of Crimson, there's the Blaze, the Stukov, so not really giving too much away in terms of damage. They still will more than likely want something else on that front line to assist with some of that, I guess, splitting of the aggro, because the Blaze, as much as he can really take a pounding and really just come out at the end of it unscathed, if it's all on one person, he can kind of get bullied around a bit. So we'll probably be seeing a full main tank for the side of Downfall, and a lot of the damaged heroes are still on the board if they do end up going for something like a Genji, if they are looking to go in that direction. But then again, looking at the other side, could be a little bit hard to get in onto some of those heroes.
I do quite like the Arthas takeaway as well. I suppose it really was between the ETC and the Arthas. ETC having the extra CC, well, I suppose comparable CC, but easy to land CC, so to speak, but a lot squishier as a result. So by going for the Arthas and taking that one away, once the commitment has been made by Maev, Greymane, Tyrael, that's a lot of attack speed that could be reduced compared to the one-off stun and juking of, are you going to mosh pit? Am I going to sank? Who's going to get their ultimate off first? So these are good bans. It's a solid draft so far. I'm just curious to see how Downfall flesh things out. We know they are a team that can draft, like we've seen Cho'Gall from them before, so anything's possible.
Anything really is possible, and just wondering where the damage comes from. It is actually going to be a Junkrat helping out on that on the damage front. We saw it from Snitch on Dignitas doing so much work, and also can very much disrupt any kind of engagement coming out from the other side. A lot of those riptides and the traps can make it very hard to really navigate throughout these fights, and just throws a lot of chaos in amongst these objectives.
I think it's really going to be on Junkrat to make sure his explosive mind finds value. They've got a bit of a disruption comp, correct? So you've got the condemns, you've got the blinds, the punishments, the lurking arm. I mean, there's a lot of ways for them to turn things around, re-engage, or disperse the chaos that is going to be coming at them like a full train steam ahead. So I'm just curious to see now how we flesh things out. How do we finalize this comp from Crimson? You're going to need a support with Stukov taken away. Ufa seems quite likely for the double protection. Seems quite likely to prevent this disruption that we've just touched on. but the fights would need to be short and sharp.
Yeah, another option for that dive style could be the Karazim, but they are going to go with their Uther. Just give that little bit of extra protection for some of those diving heroes. Just
Yes.
if the Sanctification is not there, you've got a Divine Shield to help out. Just allow that Greymane to just go to town on some of that backline. And if that Greymane does manage to get a hold of that Junkrat, he can go down incredibly quickly. And so it's going to be a lot onto Downfall trying to keep that backline alive, because if they are not able to do so, that front line is going to have some troubles.
Speaking of front lines, Anubarak is going to be doing a lot of work, especially if he goes for the Cocoon. That Cocoon, I would be betting, is going to be aimed towards Blaze to prevent that bunker from coming on out. As we mentioned, this is a disruption comp, a comp that wants to try and stick around and fight for a while to really counteract the weakness of Uther, that he has long cooldowns and he has little sort of sustained healing. And the Cassia would amplify that even further. Two very distinctive comps. Execution, 100% the name of the game here. On the side of Crimson, all out aggression, looking for that member, executing, getting the kill, and getting out. The flip side of that being the Downfall. Can we disperse? Can we survive? And can we make these fights go for long?
Yeah, that's going to be the name of the game, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this early game plays out. And as you mentioned, it's going to be a lot onto how this dispersion composition from Downfall is, or how they're going to be able to play it out. Because if either of those two damage dealers on the side of Downfall get caught out, they can go down incredibly quickly, especially to things like the Greymane, the Maiev, who have a lot of dive potential and helped out by Anubarak and Tyrael. All of those heroes have ways of getting into a fight. And there's only so many tools you have on the side of Downfall to try and help out those allies.
I mean, absolutely. And this interesting point of psychological warfare, right? How do you best deal with this? Because some of these occasions, you're not going to have time to communicate, say, please peel for me, please help me out. In that split second, you need to make an executive decision, and you need to make sure it is the right one. But here we are, week number 2. It's night 1 of that, and we are ready to brawl. Best of 3 between both of these teams. It's Downfall up against Crimson. My eyes are looking at Downfall in the blue, led by Fillets on Johanna. Shirk, aka Shrek is Love, is Stukov. Superfish is on Blaze. Konya is on Junkrat, and Magic Gnome is on Cassia.
And on the red side, aptly on the red side, it is Crimson with Azure on the Greymane, Jesmez on Tyrael, Altivian is on the Maiev, Shadow is on Uther, and KVA is on the Lovebug and Anubarak.
Lovebug indeed. And this is the viciousness at level 1 here by the Greymane. A very different build, really, since the rework. Cocktail is no longer the go-to. Human attack speed range with those Quicksilver bullets is a lot of value. As Altivian jumps in and looking for the Tether followed up by the Burrow Charge from KVA. Looking for the early level 1 punch on, looking for the CC. Can they find that pick target? The negation, the ability to disperse already is there. As you see, nobody from Downfall is going to be caught this early on.
Yeah, just a bit of trading back and forth, but it is Downfall who does have the better wave clear and much more easy and safer wave clear at their disposal. So they can clear the waves and then move on, and they can be the more proactive of teams in this early stage of the game. But Crimson not really too worried about that just yet, because once these objectives start coming out where they can really start forcing some fights, that's really where their team comp is going to start to really flourish.
It's interesting to see how both these teams are actually rotating as a unit. You can see that Downfall are coming on through, looking for Azure. They're going to go straight on in with that Impale and the Fen, but KVA comes across, does not land the Burrow Charge, and Altivian was desperately hungry for that one to connect. But it's interesting to note, the more aggressive team in Crimson are actually going to rotate through the flank, whilst Downfall, because they have the superior wave clear, can be the ones acting as the aggressive through that mid part.
Yeah, and they're going to be using this to invade aggressively. They have the numbers advantage, but they are just going to be poking away Crimson, just disrupting this mercenary capture early on into this game.
The camp has been finished. Blaze making sure of that one, swinging the hammer, gets it. There's going to be some casual going on through to the mid lane. This is actually fantastic stuff so far by Downfall, because if they can hit level 10 first, they can try and dictate the snowballing momentum of this game and really push back that early game strength that a comp like this from Crimson can have.
Yeah, it is going to be very important for them to really dictate the pace of the game, because if Crimson start really making the proactive plays around the map, that's when the troubles are really going to start to stack up, as they do manage to get a great engagement onto Magic Gnome.
Stun after stun onto Magical Gnome as he gets jumped on down. He tries to run, but it's not going to be far enough. Does not matter if you have avoidance. He could not avoid death there. And first blood to Crimson. Fitting for their name, fitting for their colors, and fitting for the shrine. That's up in 20 seconds.
Yeah, a great timing to pick up that kill, but it's not going to really be too much of a disadvantage for the side of Downfall, as the Cassia, very early on, is going to be respawning in time for this shrine, but it's still nice for Crimson to pick up that kill to just equalize some of the experience loss that they have from the amount of pressure coming in from Downfall so early on.
There you have it. First shrine is up and ready. Jesmez, for the meantime, is actually still in the top lane, pushing that one out, looking to try and get the XP advantage. And you'll see a lot of time with this very first Punisher. That's not actually worth committing as a 5-man unit. You'll see 3 people commit to it, the other 2 soaking individual lanes, and they'll get the XP to make sure they can do stuff with that. Now, he has rotated on down, trying to slightly level out that difference in XP that came from Downfall's superior early game wave clear.
Yeah, and we see a nice advantage already for Downfall because they were the first onto the point, but now that all the members of the Crimson are down here, they can really start to get their aggressive composition to play through.
They'll go in with the Condemned first of all. Konya! Oh, the explosive mine, not explosive enough. He falls to the floor, and Shrek is there with the lurking arm saying, "You shall not pass," and that they don't. They get the kill, they go back onto the point, but it's 39 to 21. Magic Gnome, he can be a madman, chuck a spear, get it for easy. Yeah, that's exactly what they do. Is Superfish lands the ult, spreads the fire, and picks up Punisher number 1.
Yeah, not really too much that Crimson could do there. There was only so much pressure they could really start pushing onto the side of Downfall, and someone was more than likely going to be able to throw in a single spell and pick up that last one. So even though the fight does go in favor of Crimson, the first Punisher does go over to the side of Downfall, with kind of just equalizing a lot of the pressure. So Downfall is getting a lot of the objectives, taking down towers on the side of Crimson, but Crimson is starting to get these fights to go in their favor.
That they are, and like I say, it's all going to come down to the discipline as to how Downfall can react. You saw Condemn go out there to try and open up the fight. As soon as they realized that the Johanna had no pilling mechanism, no reliable one, except for the slow component of Punish, there was a dive straight away from both Altibian and Caviar onto that backline, and the explosive mine, I tell you what, milliseconds too late as he falls to the floor like the martyr that he is.
Yeah, he almost got out of there, just not enough. I think it was just the last auto attack coming out from the Greymane really finishing the job, but even though the fight did go well, it's not enough to get the objective, and that's one thing that we're going to have to look at as we get into the next few shrines, is that will these fights be able to go quick enough that Crimson are able to clean them up and then be able to get the advantages from that? Or are Downfall going to be able to have enough control around the areas to be able to just mitigate some of the losses that they're getting in these team fights just by picking up the objectives?
Without a doubt there, Gio. It's really going to be one of execution and discipline. That's what we are seeing so far. The XP very, very close. Only 2 kills in it so far as we reach that 6-minute mark. Macro is where these teams are focusing on so far. Get that XP soak, hit level 10 first. I'm really concerned otherwise, because otherwise we've seen what Downfall can do. They, I would argue, definitely have the superior fight. It's just a case of can Crimson jump in, get that kill or not? Because if they don't get that reset, or for lack of a better term, if they don't get that initial first bloods, it's not going to work out for them.
Yeah, that's just how these team comms did end up shaping up at the end of the draft. It's just a very solid 5v5 team fighting composition coming out from Downfall, but on the other side, it's just all about that first pick, and if you're not getting that to work, you are going to be struggling. And we have seen those couple of kills going over to the side of Crimson, but it hasn't been enough to pick up some of those objectives. Still towers up all over the map on the side of Downfall. So that's a lot of experience on the table for Crimson to pick up. They do have their heroics now, so they can start applying some pressure, and Downfall are playing rather cautiously now.
Absolutely, and rightfully so. We've seen what teams can do in the past when they can punish you with those very small windows of XP gaps. But no, Downfall play this one safely. They realize the conditions of Crimson's comp is looking for a pick, especially with that state of the game being present. But they've got 10 now, and they can respectfully turn things around as this next shrine comes up.
And it's actually going to be the Flailing Swipe picked up by the Stukov, so realizing that it's not going to be enough to just throw away one target with that massive shove, needing to really just clear the air, just get everyone out of there, make sure that they can get as many people out of the way as possible.
It's actually interesting because typically speaking from Shrek, he's very well known for picking the massive shove. isolating a single target and really trying to dictate the pace of the fight from that. But as we've already sort of discovered and touched on, the amount of dive potential, the flating swipe should find it infinitely far more value.
Yeah, it'll be very important once those dives start coming out, and as we do have the next shrine of activated, we also have the mercenary camp, the shaman camp being picked up on the top side, so that's going to be another point of pressure that Downfall can use throughout this next objective.
Absolutely, it can be. Crimson cannot respond for that one for another 40 seconds until that camp respawns on their side of the map. They are going to take their eyes off the prize for the meantime, focus on the Shaman Houndmaster himself, and then decide to go back to things. 11-9, very, very close. They're still waiting for that all-important 5v5 skirmish, understanding how these teams are approaching this game, what their mentality is, what their movement is looking like, and how do they position themselves to best accommodate this.
Oh, they do get the pick now.
They do indeed. They jump straight on in. That's the flaming swap to start off with the bunker to follow up. The cage has gone down as the Templefine finishes the Reptile into the backline, followed up by the lurking arm. Nothing that Shadow can do, but now he gets the ability to come back in. Embers are low, and it shows the first one to fall on down. This is the dream fight for Downfall so far. It does not matter if Shrek is cocooned in the backline because the damage has already been done. One component taken away from Crimson, and it's all downhill.
Yeah, they just weren't able to secure that first kill. Crimson, they weren't able to get the Umbral Chains onto the Junkrat, so he wasn't able to get himself completely out and was locked in the Warden's cage, but too many defensive tools on the side of Downfall that they weren't able to push all the way through. That, as we mentioned, the Flailing Swipe getting a lot of value, that bunker as well, just a little bit too hard to push through. And in the end, when those fights go more than just a few seconds, the Crimson lineup just doesn't really have that staying power in those fights.
It really doesn't. You saw a pretty good example of that just from that fight as the Immortal Punisher now does spawn. A very similar XP differential is still present despite more sieging pressure being achieved here by Downfall as they now put their attention onto the very first fort of the game, looking to try and put some work in, but the jump has already come out from Mr. Punisher, so it's looking like Crimson want that re-engage. Level 13 is dangerously close, however, but it doesn't seem to be a matter of contention. They're going to jump straight on him. Blast Shield comes out, connecting with 3. The KVA is low on mana, and the team of Crimson cannot seem to find their mark. Forced to back away once again, and they go for the Punisher to clear things out.
Yeah, and again, it's just defensive tools on the side of Downfall that's making it very hard for Crimson to just lock down that single target. And it's just something that they're going to have to try and find a way in when some of those tools are down, or when a single member is isolated, or else that is just going to be a repeat factor throughout the rest of this game.
Rip Air at level 13, picked up here by Junkrat. Going to increase that knockback from the concussion mine by 50%. Absolutely huge numbers. Really accentuating the idea of this disruption tactic, followed up by the virulent reaction on Stukov. As the fight does go across, that's going to be the jump on in by Blaze, but followed up straight away by Cocoon.
There we go.
Sanctification is there, and this time they don't make a mistake, but the Riptide is going to fight for 4 members, just like that. The Saint expires, and Konya says, "This is my time to shine. I am the hero. The Russian man is dead, but I will deliver the payload."
Wow, that was an absolutely massive Riptide, and it looked like it was a good start to the fight, but as you mentioned, that Sanctification went down, and the Ball Lightning plus that Riptide just absolutely decimated the Crimson lineup, and it was, as I mentioned, it was a good start, but now they're just starting to lose out on the fights now, and they're just bleeding objectives. We're looking at the experience, a rather hefty lead going in favor of Downfall, and it's starting to get a little bit rough for the side of Crimson in this first game.
And it really is, man. As you can see from these fights alone, if they can't find their match, the fights are going downhill from there. And I tell you what, that Sanctification, as beautiful as it was, did not account for the fact that a Riptide as big as that was going to be the follow-up. The Blessed Shield hit every single member of the Warden's cage. It was all there. It all looked so perfect. But I mean, just Gio, the Divine Shield wasn't even used. That's how much pressure the Shadow was under to decide, you know, where do we go with this fight? How do I best respond?
Yeah, when you've got pretty much your whole team there stuck on a single point, and you've got a Riptide coming for all of them, you're just like, which person is in dire need of this Divine Shield, and who can we acceptably let take a lot of that damage? But in the end, it was just a little bit too much to deal with. They did end up losing a whole bunch of members, and we're seeing Downfall really apply the pressure now that they've got this really good advantage early on.
There you have as Jesmes finishes up the Shaman camp there. Konya making good use of his level 13 talent to bounce around this map, making sure that he is very elusive in his nature. If Crimson can try and find a isolated member, a little bit too greedy, too overconfident, this would work in favor of them as they are hungry for that level 16 and they need to try and find it before the Shrine because it's up in 25 seconds.
Yeah, and this is going to be very important that Crimson do try and get to 16 before the Shrine gets taken by Downfall. There's still a bit of time that they can work with, and there's a lot of they have a bit of room to give up. They can afford about half of the guidance to go over to the side of Downfall, but they need to be able to get a fight soon, because if they just keep on bleeding objectives, there's only so many structures that they can actually give up before it starts wailing on the core.
I mean, you can only take so many sacrifices before you're forced to say enough is enough, and we've seen some of the discipline from teams like Dignitas when you got one shot left in your core, but you decide we can still go for this one. So there's definitely still lots left in the tank as this next one does indeed get ready to rock and roll. 27-2, 16 is there. Now it is do or die for KVA and the boys to find their mark and to find that all-important pick.
Yeah, it's very hard for Crimson because they want to be able to get in, but they also need to be very cautious of the amount of just long-range damage coming out from the side of Downfall. The Junkrat is able to throw so much from long range, but they are just going to go straight for the fight.
That's the Cocoon to prevent the ball lightning, but it gets popped immediately. Oh, looking to try and find that pick. Certification is down for 5 seconds. I believe it was interrupted by a CC as Azure goes deep. He's looking for the pick onto Konya. He's going to get the right
brilliant.
shoot. It doesn't get the Riptide and the certification. He's hanging on for the Riptide for so long. Crimson in a split second adapting to the situation that is presented to him. But they end up taking the damage regardless. The shield comes out from Tyria to try and negate it, but now the re-engage comes across. Konya's the focus. This time he falls on down, and the grenades will do nothing. Crimson, they really are hungry for the fight. They've had enough. They lose the Punisher, but they get the triple. Looking for the quad kill. They try and fight on the point, so they don't want the Punisher to jump on top of them, and it's going to be Superfish jiving in and out.
Oh, come on.
The Punisher is there as well. And that prevents any kind of quad kill shenanigans from taking place.
Oh, that's always just painful to watch. Just the Blaze just 1v4, just drops down the bunker, just plays in around that, and then all of a sudden the Punisher comes in just slamming people left and right. So he does manage to get out of there, but a great fight coming out for Crimson. In the end, yet again, they are going to be losing objectives, and they're not able to really apply pressure around the map. And this has just been the story of the game so far. They're able to get picks here and there, but they're just not able to really translate into anything around the map so far.
It's been quite interesting to actually watch how they've approached every different skirmish, and they've had a different idea in terms of the Cocoon targets, especially going for the Stukov that time around, preventing the floating swipe. And then the fight we just saw take place there was on towards the Cassia to prevent the ball lightning. But I mean, there's a lot for them to get through, right? The Riptide, the blinds, the stuns, the CCs, the explosive traps, the concussion mines. They managed to execute that one pretty well, though, with the Divine Shield and the Sanctification. And with the impeccable timing and execution of that, they were able to find the triple kill. But as you mentioned there, Gio, comes down to that structural difference at the end of the day as well.
Yeah, and at the very end of it, it looked like it was his Downfall realizing we can't let Crimson get this objective. So they kind of just threw themselves into the slaughter to try and get those last few Guardians. They did manage to get it, but they did end up giving up a couple of lives for the act. But still, Downfall are very much in the controlling seat right now. They are applying pressure around the map, and it is going to be onto Crimson to try and get more of those fights, because unless that fight goes incredibly dominant in their favor, they're just losing out.
It's actually quite interesting to note here that there was a very healthy 2-level lead for the side of Downfall, but that has all been evened out now. But if you actually take it a little bit of an account, really, for the minimap, look at the XP differentials. Just look at how good of a job Crimson are doing of keeping themselves in this one. They've not picked up a single fault, and they've lost every single fault. Yet the XP is this close. Yeah,
you have to really commend Crimson so far on how they've played this game. Sure, they've been losing out on objectives left, right, and center, but as we do have a potential invade coming at Downfall, Crimson have been able to do just enough to keep themselves afloat in this game and really keep it competitive despite how one-sided the objectives have been so far.
Superfish is on the flank as Johanna once again goes in onto the point, says that Shaman camp will be ours. The Cassie gets locked in place once again. Certification comes out very early on. This time no chance for a Konya to come on through, but there's the Riptide. It's going downtown and it picks up Tyriel in a matter of moments. Three people hop into the bunker, negating all of the passive damage that does come from the Archaic Angel himself. And I tell you what, there, it is now time for Downfall to look at picking up a keep.
Yeah, they've got one member down on the side of Crimson, and they've still got so many tools to work with just in their basic kit that it's very hard for Crimson to get in there without the extra member going in with them. And it's just so hard for Crimson to really get any room in these fights to themselves, because, as you mentioned, all those tools, just like the mines, the traps, the swipe, the bunker, everything is just really making it obnoxious for Crimson to try to get anything done. And the amount of pressure coming in from Downfall is just really hard to deal with.
You can see it there, Superfish using the jet propulsion to get himself into the thick of action as KVA and Altivian try to respond with their own counteracting CC, but it's just not enough. The hand of protection did have to come out there from from the Shadow to make sure that Altivian had enough time to utilize that Vault of the Wardens. But now, this is the win condition. It has been set up impeccably even, as that keep is down, and this is where the Punisher is going to be spawning.
Yeah, this is the Punisher that could very well just end the game, as it will be pushing through that open keep. There is potential for Crimson to be able to drag it towards that center keep, but that would just really put them into a very precarious situation. But they are leaving this rather late. They do manage to get 20 because of it, but now they have to get this fight to go completely in their favor, or else that objective is just going to blast them down.
Cocoon goes out, Warden's Cage as well, followed up by the bunker. That's a lot of armor from all these members. Level 20 is there finally now, locking those talents, looking for kills. They're gonna find it! Riptide says hello, and they blow members up. Both Altivian and KVA are disastrously low, and the Shadow is looking to buy some time. He does have redemption. He's trying to bait these members to come towards him, but they have their eyes on the prize. The Arcane Punisher is running on down, arguably the hardest one to try and deal with. That on top of a core, I think that was their chance. They had to find the fight there, because now this is incredibly hard to defend.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just not, they just don't have enough in the tank, and every time they tried, the delay, the tools on the side of Downfall just makes it so incredibly hard to deal with. And it didn't help that Sanctification got interrupted and was not able to come out in that fight. And here we have just the Maiev going down, just not able to get too much done in this fight. They do manage to pick up the Junkrat, but it's just not enough at this point.
They leech it across into the second keep though, but KB is getting dropped low. He's going to fall on down. The Cocoon comes across. Yes, Azure finds the kill to Konya, but it's just too little too late. The Punisher down to half. You can't say the same about their core. 20% of falling. He jumps to the side. The swipe comes across as Downfall dominate game number one with a very good counter response to this Maiev hyper carry style.
Yeah, and we just saw it time and time again. The Junkrat was doing so much work, not really in the damage numbers, but it was just in the amount of control in and around the fights. Just the mines, the Riptide got incredible value and just made it so hard for the side of Crimson to really stack up in these team fights. It was the composition that wanted to dive as a unit, get onto that sanctification, and then just clean up from there. But time and time again, the kills weren't coming in quick enough, and it didn't really allow them any opportunity to get out of it afterwards. And then they just got punished by the anti-dive tools that Downfall had.
I mean, to say that they responded well in that draft is an understatement, and to say that they actually performed well was an understatement. They dominated that game. They really did. And we knew this game was going to be a close one based on where these guys are situated on the ladder. But obviously they have watched what has been happening during the Western Clash and taken a bit of time to decide, okay, what is the best way to respond to this? And I tell you what, you usually put it down to the case of, if you have a composition like this on the side of Crimson where you have all this dive, you should be the ones that are in control, right? You're the ones that are bringing the pain, bringing the aggression, and bringing that kind of high anxiety to your opponents. But the fact of the matter was, they were far more scared of the opposition, right? They were far more like, we can't just blindly chuck out a Sanctification or just chuck out a Cocoon. We've got to be so conscious of Konya, especially. I have to commend him as almost like an MVP-worthy performance as those Riptides single-handedly were just crushing every single member on the side of Crimson.
Yeah, as you mentioned, time and time again, those Riptides is clearing out that dance floor and just allowed the rest of the members of Downfall to just pick apart the side of Crimson. Just didn't allow the Crimson lineup to get those kills and then get away with it. Every time they did manage to either pick off the Cassia or the Junkrat or even the Stukov, the rest of Downfall were there and they were able to just blast the Crimson lineup to bits. And they just weren't able to get any advantage, Crimson, and they were just never able to be the proactive team around the map, and they just kept on losing objective after objective, and then they were just having to play very cautiously, and they just were not able to dictate any plays around the map.
I mean, as soon as you meet a well, I suppose, how do I say this? As soon as the team that is forced to be aggressive ends up responding rather passively, you know you've lost, right? Like, it's a very bad sign when they are jumping on it and going, look, we actually can't execute like this comp is designed to do. We thought we had the more OP draft. We thought we had all the meta picks in the world. But this response from them it's just so disgustingly strong. Now, I mean, the next map is being locked in. It is going to be a Volskaya Foundry, so very similar in its workings as to how the Punisher works. You know, when you pick up the Triglav Protector, you are going to be that sort of that beast that jumps from afar, looks for kills, looks for those engagers. So I expect to see, I want to say very similar comps, but I think if you're Crimson, you'd be very reluctant to try and run a Maiev comp again.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's going to be a little bit discouraging that this composition that they had a lot of time to work on, and they were carefully crafting, that it just got pretty much dismantled just in the draft. A lot of the tools just in that composition on the side of Downfall was just made to deal with a lot of what Crimson were bringing to the table. So as you mentioned, this map Volskaya Foundry, it does have a lot of the same play patterns. So you wouldn't be too surprised to see similar lineups or similar compositions as we saw in the previous map. We'll just have to wait and see how the priorities go, because first pick is again going over to the side of Crimson, and as I mentioned earlier, and just looking at the results from the Western Clash, first pick didn't necessarily have the best of results.
I mean, like we were saying at the very start of the broadcast tonight, there's just so many good heroes, right?
There's too many.
It's impossible to pick them all, right? So, yes, you can go for that Maiev in the first rotation and go, GG, the team that got Maiev won. Well, clearly you can see here that the Maiev team did not win, because the response and the proactive thinking was right there to say, we'll grab a Blaze, we'll grab a Stukov, you know? All of these came together and really dictated the pace of that game. So going into this one, I would like to either see a Tracer composition, an Abathur composition, something different with a different play style that could, if they want to try and go for an execution style of play, be a little bit more explosive, or maybe just adjust their bans.